G'day everyone. Today we're talking about Chapter 2, Governance and Political Systems, New Zealand versus Scandinavia. This chapter is about something most people only notice when it fails: governance. The machinery that decides who has power, how it gets used, and how hard it is to change course once a decision is made. Who holds the pen? Well, if you want to understand how a country works, start here. Who holds the pen that writes the rules? Constitutions, parliaments, councils, ministries. These are not abstract civics terms. They determine how stable your operating environment is as a business owner, how predictable public services are for families, and how much faith people place in the system. New Zealand and Scandinavian countries are both small democracies with reputations for transparency, but their handwriting reveals different traditions of authority, accountability, and trust. New Zealand: one house, fast legs, light brakes. New Zealand likes simplicity: unicameral parliament, constitutional monarchy, MMP. The benefit is speed. Decisions can be made quickly. Governments can implement policy without the drag of an upper house. In a crisis, this can be a genuine asset. But there is a catch. Without a second chamber and with party discipline, the brakes are limited. Once a government has the numbers, it can move. Sometimes that looks efficient. Other times it feels like a teenager driving a ute across a muddy paddock, fast, fearless, not entirely under control. And for business, speed cuts both ways. The same agility that can remove barriers can also introduce sudden compliance costs, rapid rule changes, and policy lurches that make planning harder. Local government, the 3 Rs, and the quiet disengagement problem. At the local level in New Zealand, councils manage roads, rubbish, and rates, the famous 3 Rs. But turnout, hovering around 40%, tells its own story. We complain about councils, then we don't vote. That matters because a low participation weakens legitimacy, and it also makes local government an easy punching bag. Many councils are expected to fix big, complex issues with limited funding tools. Then they get blamed for not performing miracles. It creates a weird dynamic where people want local outcomes but default to national blame. And national politics stays over-centralised because local government isn't empowered or trusted enough to carry more responsibility. Scandinavia: consensus, coalitions, and the committee muscle. Now contrast that with Scandinavia. Proportional politics there is not just a voting system, it's a culture. Coalition building is normal. Power sharing is expected. Negotiation is not seen as weakness, it is seen as the job. Yes, it can be tedious. Scandinavia has a reputation for committees, consultations, and meetings that could have been an email. But that culture does something important. It produces stability. Policy tends to be tweaked rather than torn up. And because institutions consistently deliver, citizens behave like their vote matters. Turnout commonly sits around 80 to 85%. That's not just a statistic. It reflects a public belief that participation has a point. Local empowerment: closer to services, closer to the firing line. One of the most practical contrasts is decentralisation. In places like Denmark, municipalities carry major responsibilities, often including significant parts of welfare delivery, education, and elements of health and social services. They are tax-funded and powerful. This creates a different kind of accountability. Decisions are closer to the people. When services disappoint, the responsible politicians are local, visible, and reachable. They might be your neighbour. They might coach your kid's sports team. That changes the tone. It also creates a different relationship with bureaucracy. If you decentralise big responsibilities, you need systems, you need process, you need capability at local level. That can feel heavy, but it also means problems are worked on closer to where they show up. Trust and transparency. Clean is not the same as trusted. Here's the paradox. Both New Zealand and Scandinavia rank highly on transparency and low corruption measures, but public trust behaves differently. In New Zealand, many people assume politicians are all the same. Each new scandal gets an eye roll. Even when the system is relatively clean, cynicism is common. In Scandinavia, trust is more cultural. High taxes are accepted because who are these people? Citizens believe they will see value in the return. They don't love paying tax for fun. They accept it because the social contract feels real and the delivery tends to be consistent. This difference matters because trust lowers friction. When trust is high, reforms can be implemented with less suspicion, less sabotage, and more follow-through. Participation and representation. Diversity versus gladiator politics. New Zealand's MMP has improved representation. More Māori voices, more women, more minority parties, more genuine influence for smaller parties. That is a real strength. But the tone can still be adversarial. We often treat elections like a mandate to undo what the last lot did. Reform and repeal become the rhythm. And when that happens repeatedly, trust erodes because people expect instability. Scandinavia's coalition culture softens the pendulum. Government changes, but there's usually less appetite for tearing everything up. It's more like steering than swerving. The cultural tells, the Kiwi shrug and the Nordic nod. Humour sometimes sharpens the truth. In New Zealand, when a bold reform is announced, the reflex can be, yeah, nah, we'll see how long that lasts. We have learnt to expect sudden lurches. In Scandinavia, the reflex can be, right, let's examine the evidence and consult stakeholders. That means reform moves slower, but when it lands, it tends to stick. Neither approach is perfect. New Zealand's agility has sometimes produced world-leading outcomes. Scandinavia's slower pace has produced continuity and trust. Why this matters for businesses and communities? Well, if you run an SME, governance shapes the weather you operate in. In a fast, centralised system, policy shifts arrive quickly. That means sudden changes to costs, compliance, labour settings, procurement and confidence. Planning can feel like building a deck while the tide keeps moving. In a steadier, consensus-driven system, businesses can plan further ahead because rules change more gradually and predictably. You still get change, but it tends to be negotiated into place rather than rammed through and then ripped out. For communities, the impact is daily. In New Zealand, councils might fix the pothole eventually, but they're not typically running your school, welfare services, and local health delivery. In Denmark, your municipality likely has a bigger hand in those outcomes. Accountability feels closer. So does bureaucracy. Closing thought, speed versus trust. Governance is a skeleton, mostly invisible, but it shapes everything else. Comparing New Zealand and Scandinavia puts a spotlight on real tension. Is it better to get things done quickly, even if half the country mutters that won't last, or to move slower, build consensus, and carry people with you? That tension, speed versus trust, will echo throughout the rest of this comparison. So to learn more, read the extended article, which is linked in the description. And my contact details are there too if you'd like a quick chat about how this could be benefiting your business. Thanks for being here. Why not subscribe and have regular updates on the things that matter for New Zealand business? Okay, see ya.